This one's good. Let's see if this one will do it.
I can just hold it.
Yeah, just hold it. Okay, good morning again. Glad to see everybody here in person, and everybody that's watching us on YouTube. My name is Judy Burgett. I'm part of the worship committee, and I'm helping out today with the service. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. Before we begin, we have a few announcements, and to start this off, we have Ann Harvey.
Is this? Good morning. I'm a member of the Finance Committee, and we thank everybody that has already turned in their pledge, and we'd like to hear from those that are planning to pledge as soon as possible. We are going to be getting that budget ready for a board meeting April the 9th, I believe, and so we need May 9th. Yes, I'm sorry, May 9th for the, what did I say?
You said April.
Oh.
It's like
Okay. May the 9th, I'm sorry. And so we need to get the budget planned for that meeting for the board to look at and approve. So once again, thanks to everybody that's already pledged, and we'd appreciate getting those pledges that haven't come in yet. Thank you.
Okay, the next announcement will be about our second Monday monthly lunch. This month it will be held on May 9th. That can't be right. Yes, May 9th. That's right. That is right. Okay, May 9th, and it'll be at the Bonefish Grill in Knoxville. And if you would please let us know if you are attending so we can do accurate reservations. Next up, we have ongoing religious exploration offerings. We have on the evenings, Wednesday evenings, thinking about theology. The Zoom information is in the newsletter. And then on Thursday evenings at 6:30, just a general discussion of various topics, also on Zoom. Okay, we have a UU Women's Spirit at the Mountain on May 18th to 22nd. It's a biannual spirit event for women from all walks of life, and you can get information from Ann Hess, or there's contact information in the newsletter and in the order of service. And then we have Earth Magic at Westside. This will be going on all year. It's an earth-centered gathering each month near the time of the new moon. The first one will be May 1st, and there'll be a time to have some, hopefully it will be able to be outside, and there will be food and just gathering together rituals. And Reverend Carol has information, and there's information in the newsletter. And now we will have some gathering music from Sandra Thomas.
Thank you, Sandra. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you here this morning. I'm Reverend Carol Bodeau. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm privileged to serve Westside as minister. One other note, just for those of you who are here in person, your order of service has an error in it. We are not doing flower communion again this week. So don't panic. You don't have to have flowers this week. It's all good. This week we are actually doing our third service in our series on the different world religions, the holy month, the holy days of this month, which it's not always every year that all this, the Easter, Ramadan, Passover are all quite so close together as they are this year, and so close to Beltane as well. So today we're going to be talking about Passover. And Passover is about liberation. It's about oppression and liberation. And there are, as we're going to talk about in a few minutes, a whole lot of ways to enter that conversation. A whole lot of different positions. So just for starters, as I invite the bowl to sound, what I want to invite you to do is just ask yourself internally, when I think of the concepts of oppression and liberation, what's the first thing that comes to my mind? And are there maybe other parts of it that I might want to think about?
Reverend Carol will light the chalice, and I have these words by Martha Kirby, Capo. Let this purest of flames kindle in each of our hearts a pledge to justice, a commitment to freedom, and a reverent awe for the crystalline glories that sparkle along our footpaths.
This is going to be one of those days where we juggle the microphone back and forth. Before we have special music this morning, we're going to add one special candle lighting that is not in your order of service. We're going to light a candle for another one of our beloved members who passed this last week. On Thursday, Hank Kiewit, who some of you may remember, Hank has been ill for a number of years, has been in declining health for a number of years, and he did pass on Thursday. So we are sending our thoughts to Charlotte, who is feeling a little overwhelmed right now. If you want to send Charlotte a card, you can get the address from the office, from our directory, or from one of us on the staff. So I'm going to just light a candle for Hank. So the choir is going to be singing, and I'm going to invite them to come up and get themselves in position while I tell you what the words are to this song. This song is called When Israel Was in Egypt's Land. When Israel was in Egypt's land, oppressed so hard they could not stand. I'm going to summarize the words here. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land. Tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. The Lord told Moses what to do to lead the tribe of Israel through. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land. Tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. So this is the core of the story of Passover, and it's the story that we're going to be. You guys all set? It's going to be the core of the story we're going to talk about today.
We will have our offering now, and our Share the Plate partner this quarter is the Unitarian Universalist Association. That's all.
So you can tell by the music that's not the most cheerful service in the world, right? Oppression isn't the most cheerful topic in the world. And it's really easy to focus on oppression and liberation in ways that make us feel powerless. But we're not going to do that today. We're going to talk about the ways that we actually have our own internal power in all the different ways we access the idea of oppression. So this week we are honoring the Jewish holy time of Passover, which this year was from April 15th through last night, April 23rd, so it just ended. Passover is a time to remember the escape of the Israelite or Hebrew people from enslavement in Egypt. It's a time to tell the story of Moses leading God's people out of slavery and into the promised land. And it's a story that's about focusing our attention on the causes of oppression and the sources of liberation from oppression, which pretty much is timeless, and it doesn't matter how far we are from that story theologically or historically, it's still relevant. Because oppression can take lots of forms. It might be personal oppression. We might have the oppression of personal despair that arises from mental or material circumstances in our lives. Or we might be thinking about communal oppression, such as racial injustice or economic inequity. Whatever the topic we choose to focus on, though, the story is helpful in helping us understand some essential qualities or ideas in the path to liberation from oppression. So we're going to start with the basic story. The basic story is found in the book of Exodus, which is named for the exodus of the Israelites out of Egypt. And it's recounted each Passover, usually during a Passover Seder, which is a special meal in which the foods included in the meal represent the parts of the story. And the background to the Exodus story is this. This is the backstory. Hundreds of years after the Israelite Joseph. So you might remember the story of Joseph. He's the younger brother whose older brothers sold him into slavery, and he had the coat of many colors and all the dreams, and he befriended Pharaoh. So Joseph goes into Egypt. And his family eventually joins him, and the population of Israelite people in Egypt grows. Hundreds of years later, the Egyptian rulers start to find this kind of threatening. So the Israelites become enslaved people, and even worse, their sons, all the male children, are systematically being killed by drowning them in the Nile River. Enter Moses' mother. Moses' mother she's a Hebrew woman who does not want her son to be killed, so she puts him in the basket afloat on the river, and he floats in this basket as a baby down the river, and Pharaoh's daughter finds the basket, and she adopts the baby and raises him, and Moses becomes this powerful figure in the court of the Pharaoh. But he starts to observe the abuse of Israelite workers by Egyptian slave owners and the people, running the workforces. And he can't bear it. So he kills an Egyptian taskmaster who's unjustly beating a Hebrew person. And at this point, he needs to get out of town. He wants to quietly just leave the city and become a shepherd and be out there in the calm and the quiet in the desert. But instead, he is called by God to become the one who will liberate all of the Hebrew slaves out of Egypt. So eventually, he goes back and he says to Pharaoh, "Let my people go." Which Pharaoh, of course, says, not a chance. No way, right? Ultimately, the way the story plays out in the book of Exodus is this. Moses repeatedly goes to Pharaoh and says, "Let my people go." And Pharaoh keeps saying, "Nope, not going to happen." And so plagues begin to come to the Egyptian people. 10 plagues fall down on the land of Egypt, trying to get Pharaoh to change his mind. And at last, Pharaoh does relent and agree to free the slaves. But as the Hebrew people are leaving en masse to leave, led by Moses, headed for the Holy Land, Pharaoh changes his mind. He sends his army to overtake them. At this point in the story, the Israelites face an impossible situation. They are facing the sea. Some say it's the Red Sea. There's archaeological argument about this part of the story, okay? They are facing a sea, an impassable piece of water, and Pharaoh's army is behind them. At that moment, if you've seen the Cecil B. DeMille film, right? Moses raises his staff in the air, the sea parts, the Israelite people cross the sea, and when Pharaoh's armies get all the way out there in the middle, whoosh, the water comes back and destroys Pharaoh's army. So how do we, so far distant from that, certainly historically, maybe theologically, how do we understand such a magical story with all its plagues and divine intervention? How do we take that in as a template for liberation? Well, let's begin by asking a really key question. Just think about this for a minute. When you have heard this story before, because I know at least some of you have heard it before, who do you automatically identify with in the story? Think about that for a second. Who do we identify with in the story? It's natural as readers and listeners to instinctively identify with the underdogs, with the Israelites, the victims in the narrative. But maybe that's not the only or even the best way to enter the story. There are ways that we can enter this story from a whole lot of different angles. So there are ways that I personally can feel like the Israelites. I might be trapped by social structures, economic situations, mental habits, internal or external circumstances that I might say keep me down or limit me. I may feel trapped in my political context. I may be a person who's in a marginalized identity and feel oppressed by my identity, by the way society responds to my identity. At the same time, and this is true for us in this room, maybe I can also identify with Pharaoh, loath as I might be to do that. Maybe I can identify with Pharaoh. I have certain kinds of power and privilege. I have the ability and the agency to make decisions not only for myself, but often for others. I often fear things that are different from me and have the urge to restrict others who might want to do things differently than I do. I can be judgmental and angry sometimes and lash out at people around me when they do things that I see as threatening to my security or my personal power. I don't know about you, but most UUs I know can be kind of determined and pig-headed every once in a while, right? I've seen it happen. We like to keep systems in place that we believe serve us and our interests, and we can have pretty strong resistance to giving others the space to live literally completely freely and authentically, if that authenticity seems to threaten me in some way. So there are a lot of angles to enter this story from. We have to begin by understanding that the story of oppression and liberation can call us to many different kinds of reflection. All right, so just sit with that for a minute. Now, next in the story, we hear that Moses, the prophet, the voice of one who used to be close to Pharaoh but has turned away because his deeper sense of the right and the good is calling. Moses has to do what we call speaking truth to power. Again, now we might relate to many different characters here in Moses' situation. Maybe we're Moses. Maybe we have to ask, am I willing to step out of my comfort zone, my position of ease and familiarity, leave behind the privileges I have because of the system, just because I see that those privileges are unjust? Am I willing to do that? That's what Moses had to do. Or maybe we, like Moses, have hesitation about taking those kinds of risks, to directly confront systems of oppression, to step up to Pharaoh, whatever that looks like, our next door neighbor who, I don't know, is doing something with their trees that we don't like or whatever, right? How do we deal with confrontation? Moses has to deal with confrontation. Maybe in this scene of the movie, we are Pharaoh. What if we are the ones that someone is coming to us and telling us we're doing things that are oppressive or unjust? How well do we take it? How well do we take it when someone comes up to us and says, for example, when someone comes up to me and says, you know, I found that language that you used kind of oppressive, kind of prejudiced. Do we, like Pharaoh, refuse to hear that? Do we get defensive? Or do we take a step back and consider, well, maybe I need to listen to this? All right, next there are the plagues. When Pharaoh isn't able to receive Moses' wisdom that this oppressive system must stop, some bad stuff starts to happen. And the thing is, in the story, everyone's life, whether they're Egyptian or Hebrew, it doesn't matter, everyone's life is harmed by the bad effects of the plagues. The locusts, the frogs, the famine, all this stuff, the river becoming polluted, it affects everybody. Nobody is exempt from the harmful effects of the oppressive system. So we can ask ourselves, what are the systemic symptoms of oppression that we're all suffering from? I wonder what would have happened if the Egyptian people themselves had risen up in this particular story and overthrown Pharaoh and demanded change. Like, there's a lot of complicity in the story that we don't even really hear about, right? But that's not how the story goes in Exodus. But in some cases, that is how liberation happens, when even the ones who benefit from the dominant society say enough is enough. So there's some really good examples of this in our news right now. Think of the Russian people taking to the streets and ending up in jail to resist their own government's oppression of another people. That's a courageous and powerful act, right? So in this story, the Russian people who choose to step up are like the Egyptians who could have stepped up. Finally, the ultimate plague comes. And in the last plague, the most innocent in the community begin to die because of the unjust system persisting. And this is the death of the firstborn. So in the Exodus story, the Israelites are given a mechanism by which they can put a mark on the doors to protect their children, but still, imagine yourself as a Hebrew person watching innocent children die in the oppressor's community. That stinks. That's not good either. You don't want the innocent children to suffer regardless of which side they happen to be born on, right? So, it's a much more complicated story than we often tell, or than we often think about. I told you this was more serious and gloomy than upbeat and cheerful. That's the first part of it. So I want you to think about this. Where are you in the story today? Where we see ourselves in this moment, it might be different tomorrow. It might be different next week. And also, how does this affect you internally? So I'll give you a really good example. We often, with a minute someone says the word oppression, we're right at government structures, military structures, political structures, social structures, but how about internal structures? Ask yourself what kinds of internal oppression you experience that come from your own thoughts. How many of you have ever experienced workaholism in your life? Or perfectionism, perhaps? Or a moment or two of people-pleasing? Oppression is when we feel that we're not allowed to be authentically ourselves in a way that is safe and affirmed by other people. That if we are authentic, we are in some way threatened or in danger. That can take lots of forms. So we can enter this story from many, many different places. Addiction is a form of oppression, right? From which we need liberation, liberation is becoming freed from these limiting internal or external structures, psychological or material, that keep us from becoming fully who we want and deserve to be. So I'm not going to try in a 15-minute sermon to give us simple answers to that, okay? I don't have simple platitudes to comfort us, and I can't necessarily speak to where any one of us in this room or listening in YouTube feels we are in this moment in this narrative, because it's pretty complicated. But the truth of the matter is, the narrative gives us options to look at all the different roles. Right? We can think about all the different roles and how they interact with each other. And the truth is that we probably have all of them in our own heads at any given moment. Right? We have ways that we side with the oppressor and ways that we side with the oppressed. Right? I remember an interesting moment in my own family when I went to visit my parents. And we were all for environmentalism until we had to separate the recycling. And that was too darn complicated, right? For the change, but not so much, right? We all can identify with all sides of this story. So it's worth thinking about more deeply. Today on our planet, there are innumerable forms of oppression we can turn our attention towards. So today, before we move any further into the let's be hopeful part of this, we're going to take a minute to light a couple candles, and I'm going to ask Judy to light a couple candles for us. There are many different kinds of oppression. We're going to light 2 candles. And the first one we're going to light is for Glsen's Day of Silence. So some of you know Glsen is an LGBTQ plus affirming organization. And their Day of Silence, which was held on Friday, is a national student-led demonstration where LGBTQ students and their allies around the country and the world take a vow of silence for one day to protest the harmful effects of harassment and discrimination of LGBTQ people in schools. This was started in the mid-90s by 2 college students, and it's expanded all over the globe, reaches hundreds of thousands of students each year. So and on this day in April, it was on Friday, students go to school and they spend the whole day without speaking, and at the end of the day, there are rallies and things like that. So we're going to light 1 candle for that. All right. And then the second candle we're going to light a second candle to remind us of the ways that so many people are oppressed and silenced in our world. Ways that people in communities are kept from achieving their full potential through fear, greed, and prejudice by others. Particularly, we remember today the Ukrainian people. And what I'd like to invite us to do is just observe a couple moments of silence. Just a couple moments. So do you notice in the silence you can hear the birds? In the stillness, in moments of reflection, we have access to other kinds of ways of approaching things. There are brightnesses and moments of hope and moments of inspiration. So, in the story of the Israelites escaping slavery in Egypt and journeying to the Promised Land, a really essential plot twist happens at that part where the sea is parted, okay? So, imagine yourself on the brink of a hard choice. Imagine yourself either as the oppressor or the oppressed at a moment of decision where it seems like an impossible situation. There's Moses with all his people, the sea in front of them, the army behind them. I know that all of us in one moment or another in our lives can identify with that feeling of being trapped between a rock and a hard place. Right? Where we feel stuck. We don't know what decision is going to be the right decision. I just heard on NPR that one of the shows they're going to be doing this week, I can't remember which one it is going to be about research where they've studied people having to decide between loyalty and honesty. Think about that for a minute. Think about yourself stuck in a decision-making point between loyalty to someone you feel loyalty to or have committed to be loyal to and honesty. That's a tricky position. So, you're in this position. What do we have to do in that situation? The story tells us this. Leaving oppression behind is dangerous and risky. It includes potential loss, probable loss of at least something, and it requires courage and faith. So these Israelites, they have to launch out into the wilderness on a journey of faith in unfamiliar terrain with unfamiliar dangers and challenges. They have to cross impossible obstacles with basically just hope and faith and a pretty good sense of personal grit that they're going to get to the other side. They don't take the option of, oh, the sea is too big. We can't do it. We'll never make it. We should just go back. We should give up. It's too dangerous. All right? So what does that look like for us? What does it look like for us in our personal lives, in our personal relationships, in our economic circumstances, in our social circumstances? What does it mean to take that step towards the water, even when we know it's dangerous? All right? Or what does it mean to be the one who says, you know what, I've just been pushing this way too hard. I need to back off. I'm Pharaoh's army right now. I should get out of the water. Right? You can be in different places in the story. Now, the closing song that the choir is going to do is called Wade in the Water. And in the song, we hear that the people of Israel needed their God to trouble the water. So, in the story, the Israelites go into the water assuming that God's going to support them. They needed some force bigger than the individual, bigger than simple human reasoning or logic or understanding to intervene. Now, maybe that sort of intervention for us comes in the form of surprises. Doesn't have to be miracles, doesn't have to be magic. It just might be a surprise that we didn't see coming. How many people in this world are pretty darn surprised by Volodymyr Zelensky? He surprised a lot of us. We didn't expect him to do what he's done. That's been pretty surprising. I mean, he was a comedian. He's an international hero modeling behavior that was unimaginable, okay? Maybe the intervention is an innovative scientific solution to a global problem, right? Or maybe it is some kind of mystical experience. But there are lots of ways we can be surprised after we've taken a risk, right? No matter what, without the courage and the faith to have some hope that we might have a good surprise, we're just not going to be willing to take the risk of ending oppression internally or externally. It's easy to give up. So in the song that the choir is about to sing, it's wade in the water. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. God's going to trouble the water. Now, you can throw any phrase you like into the God's going to trouble the water, right? Maybe it's science is going to trouble the water, or heroes are going to trouble the water, or sheer determination is going to trouble the water. But the idea is, if we have the courage to step forward against our addiction, against our silence when we feel like we don't have the right to be honest, against our own, internal willingness to be oppressive to others, whatever it is. If we can have the courage to wade in the water, maybe we can be surprised. Maybe the people around us or something in the collective will surprise us with a positive, surprising outcome that we didn't see coming. So I'm going to invite the choir forward. Come on up. We're going to sing Wade in the Water, and I'm going to invite you all to just imagine for yourself a possible step forward into the water in a risky way that might give you different results than what you're feeling stuck in. So, going out of here today, imagine yourself wading into that water. Instead of going out of here thinking it's business as usual and I'm just going to be the same today that I was yesterday, and, you know, the things that I'm stuck with, and the things that we're stuck with in our world, we're stuck with. And besides that, I don't want to give up the stuff that being stuck benefits me, right? Think about it. You know, just play with that a little bit. What could I shift, maybe just a little bit? Maybe you're going to stick your toe in the water. You're going to wade in the small, shallow end of the pond. Maybe you're ready to dive off the deep end, plunge in, make some big change, or somewhere in the middle. But we all have the ability to make small or big changes to end oppression inside ourselves and in our world. It might mean talking to someone at the grocery store or the cashier at a business you go to who looks like they might say, "Have a blessed day." There's some internal oppression going on there, my friends. Right? There's some internal oppression going on in there when we have a resistance against saying, "Thank you so much for offering me that." That's a tiny little step, but believe it or not, that actually would change a whole lot of oppression liberation dynamics going on in our counties, in our state right now today. We have that ability. So as you go into your day and your week and this next little phase of time in your life, whatever that cycle looks like, stick your toe in the water, dive into the water, dive off the diving board into the water, whatever it is. We extinguish the chalice, but we send out this light of awakening, the passion to actually live our values more fully, and the support of this community that goes with us as we go. Go in peace and go in power.